Hi everyone, Allie here from TheFamilyMeeple, and today I am finally getting around to recording my solo challenge ranking for the first solo challenge of 2023. This year, like last year, I set myself 3 10x5 solo challenges, which each run 4 months long. So the first challenge ran from January through the end of April, and I finished it in April, meaning to record this video in May, but life gets busy and I am just now recording this on the 1st of June. So these are 10 games that I played from January through April. And like I said, I played each of the games 5 times solo in that time period. The first solo challenge of the year included the following 10 games: Artifacts Inc., Carpe Diem, Euphoria, Build a Better Dystopia, Everdell, Complete Collection, Galilean Moons, Gugong, Messina 1347, Noctiluca, Obsession, and Santa Maria. So in this video, if you haven't watched my previous videos from last year, I will be ranking these 10 games from the ones that I liked the least as a solo game specifically to the one that I enjoyed the most. And these rankings may or may not align with my overall ranking for the game as a multiplayer game, because all of them can be played multiplayer as well. But these are how I liked them solo games from my challenge. If you have not also checked out Gizmo Board Games, Brian picked up this challenge for this year as well and has been doing a 10x5 solo challenge and shared it on his channel. And if you are interested in solo gaming, you can check out his 10 games that he played and his rankings as well. There are 2 crossovers on our list, and they are not ranked the same. I will tell you that because I've already watched Brian's video. So without further ado, I will go ahead and get started with number 10 on my ranking. Coming in at number 10 is Galilean Moons. Galilean Moons is a 2020 game that was designed and illustrated by Lucas Adam and published by Fantasy Workhouse. Galilean Moons is an area control game that uses a similar card mechanic to what you might be familiar with from Ticket to Ride, where you have to collect cards of the same type or same color in order to take actions. In Galilean Moons, you will be taking actions to place your robot workers out into different sectors of the 4 moons on the board, and each of the moons are different sizes and have a different number of sectors. The cards that you need to spend will depend on the token that was placed in that sector at the beginning of the game. Your goal ultimately is to collect sets of the different colored gems by mining the different sectors of the moons by turning in cards of matching colors, to gain majorities and control each of the moons by, again, invading those territories using matching cards from your hand. And you can also earn points from the technology cards that you purchase throughout the game. Technology cards can be purchased basically at any time on your turn by turning in gems, so you have to balance whether you're going to collect the gems or turn them in to buy these technology cards, which give you ongoing abilities that you can use on your turn. The solo mode for Galilean Moons is driven by a dice roll and basically a card flip mechanic. So the way that it works is on the AI player's turn, and there's several different difficulty modes that you can use. So the AI player will take between 1 and 2 turns, I think, on each of their turns, 2 actions. And on the easy mode, they're only going to take 1 action, which is typically how I played it. So their action will consist of rolling a 4-sided dice to determine which of the 4 moons the AI will be targeting during that turn, and then either claiming a wild resource card from the face-up display, if it's available, or drawing the top card of the draw deck and then targeting sectors that have a matching color token. So for example, if I roll a 1, then the AI player will target the first moon, and I'll flip over a card. If it's blue, then they'll target every single sector on that moon that has a blue gem token on it. Because of this mechanic, the AI player I found was fairly swingy. It was still possible to beat the AI player on solo relatively consistently, but in some of my plays, it was just sort of bad luck that I continually flipped over wild cards when I was drawing from the top of the deck. And when you flip over those wild cards, the AI will actually target every single sector on that moon. And when you target those sectors, it will basically go into where the AI can claim that sector with one of their robots. If it has a base on it, then it will add a target token to it. If it already has 2 target tokens on there, then it will claim that one. If it has a target token on one that you're already on, then it will claim that one the next time that it draws that card. And so the more wild cards you draw, the worse luck you basically have, because it's going to just be targeting, potentially up to, I think, 6 or 8 different sectors on one turn, when on your turns, you really only can go into 1 at the most of these different sectors. So the AI, like I said, can be a little bit swingy, which is the number one reason why it ended up at number 10 on my list. This is a game that I really do enjoy. I enjoy it more as a multiplayer game than as a solo game, but it plays so quickly, and the fact that you can play an area control game solo at all is always a bonus. So I do recommend the game if you are looking for a kind of lightweight area control game that you will primarily be playing with other people as either an introduction to the hobby or as a family game, something you're just getting into. And then you might want to pull it off the shelf as a solo every now and then. So that is my number 10, Galilean Moons. Number 9 is Artifacts Inc. Artifacts Inc. is a 2014 game designed and illustrated by Ryan Lockett and published by Red Raven Games. Artifacts Inc. is a small box game that features dice worker placement and a tableau building mechanic. In Artifacts Inc., you will be starting out with a set of 4 cards in front of you that the AI will also start out with the exact same cards, very similar to how the multiplayer game works. And you will get a certain number of dice to start, but you can gain additional dice, which are your workers, as you go through the game. The game was originally designed for 2 to 4 players, but Ryan Lockett actually put out an official solo mode that you can find, I think, on their website and also on BGG. So it is designed by the original designer for the solo mode, and it's basically just a 2-page printout of rules that you will need in order to play it. In Artifacts Inc., you will be rolling dice at the beginning of your turn and then allocating those dice to either cards in your own tableau to produce things like resources, or you will be allocating them out into the museums to sell your artifacts that you've collected into the museums for area majority or area control, basically, mechanisms. You can spend your dice to go on dives and collect dive cards, or you can use your dice to purchase additional cards from the market. And the cards that you purchase from the market will give you typically ongoing abilities. They might give you more dice to use on your turns. They could give you the ability to turn in your artifacts that you are collecting for more money or for different things like victory points. And you'll basically be purchasing cards and building out this tableau, selling your artifacts to the museums until either you or the AI reaches 20 points. The solo mode works very well and is extremely competitive. It is a tight solo to play, and you won't likely win all of the games. Some of it will depend on your dice rolls. The AI doesn't really care what numbers they roll. They have a set number of, or like a list of different cards that they will purchase in a specific order. And then they will also be selling to the museums and typically will get those area majorities faster than you will. They'll be going on the dives and collecting those dive cards, and they'll be building out their tableau of cards in front of them as well and gaining more dice. So it plays very similarly to the multiplayer. I have played this one multiplayer with some friends of mine. It's a small box. It plays really quickly. It's actually a lot of fun to play solo. My only reason that it really sort of ended up at number 9 is that despite the solo rules being fairly straightforward, I found that I always had to have the rules out. I always had to reference the rules to remember what the order was that the AI was going to buy each of the cards. So even after 5 plays, and these were not my first 5 plays of Artifacts Inc. solo, I still had to refer to the rules every single game to just remember okay, they already bought this card, so that means they're going to buy this card next. Okay, they can't afford to buy any cards, so then what are they going to do? So I found that it wasn't very intuitive for the solo rules, and I don't know if an AI like card driven mechanism would work for this one, but the AI card like draw mechanisms tend to be more straightforward because once you learn the iconography, then you flip the card, you do what the card says, as opposed to having to follow this strict list of buy this, then buy this, then buy this, then buy this. And if you can't do whatever the action is, then do this based on what the rules state. But even having said that, this is one that I will continue to keep in my collection, will continue to pull out for solo play, because I do really enjoy that dice worker placement mechanic and the tableau building. So I enjoy playing the game. And if I just really want to play a game like Artifacts Inc. and there's nobody around, I will pull it out as a solo game and have a great time with it. So that is my number 9, Artifacts Inc. Next up, coming in at number 8 is Noctiluca. Noctiluca is a 2019 game designed by Shem Phillips with artwork from Brie Linzo, and it was published by Z-Man Games. Noctiluca is an abstract strategy game, which I have played both multiplayer and solo, and is one that I definitely enjoy both ways. I would say that I probably enjoy it about the same in both multiplayer and solo, because in the multiplayer you have that additional human player that you have to pay attention to and react to how they are interacting with the dice that are out in the middle of the board. But for solo, I do enjoy the fact that this game that can lead to a lot of analysis paralysis or AP, I don't have to worry about that if I'm playing it solo. I can just take as much time as I want to. And that's definitely an advantage of playing this one solo. So Noctiluca is, like I said, an abstract strategy game. You are basically working on set collection. And the way that you're doing this is you have a board out in front of you, and there are several different areas of the board where you are going to be seeding these translucent small dice. And so the outside spaces will get, I think, 5 dice, and then the inside spaces will get 4. And you just randomly pull these out of a bag. You don't roll them during the game. You just drop them into their area, and then whatever the pip values are, that's what the pip values are. And in the solo game, you will have all 12 of the pawns that are used in the multiplayer game. You'll have 6 for the first round and 6 for the second round. So there is no other AI player that is technically like placing out these pawns on the board like you would have in a multiplayer game where the other players are also placing these pawns out. You will place all 12 of them. But on your turn, what you'll do is you'll place a pawn out on the edge of this Noctiluca pond on the board. And depending on where you place the pawn, you will have 2 options of kind of a column or a row sort of on the board. You basically will place your pawn, and then you, in a straight line, one direction, you'll be able to take all of the dice with a matching pip value. So I could take all of the 3s, or I could take all of the 1s in that row or that column. And then those dice I have to take and place onto these little Noctiluca jar cards that I have in front of me that are looking for specific numbers and colors of dice. So maybe it needs 2 blues, an orange, and 2 purples. So I will want to look out at the board and say, is there any way that I can get those specific combinations of dice with the same pip value so I can fill up this card? When I fill up the card, then I get to claim the top point token of the matching color from that jar. And I also will get points for that card, and it will allow me to take a new card. And your goal is basically to fill out as many of these as you can, fill up as many jars as you can. If you take a dice from your selection and you can't place it in one of your 2 jars that you're actively working on, then those dice will be passed to, I think in the solo it's called the Tempest, and they will score for the AI player at the end, essentially. In a normal multiplayer game, those dice get passed around the table, and if the other player can use it, then they get to use that dice for free to fill in a space on one of their active jars. So you really want to pay close attention to only taking the dice that you can use and not grabbing a whole bunch of dice that you can't use, because you are going to hand it off and it's going to be worth points or potentially help another player in the game. And you will play out 6 turns of taking these dice, and then you will switch. You'll reseed the whole Noctiluca board. You'll play out 6 more turns like that, and then you'll add up your score. In the solo mode, after you take a turn, the Tempest player basically is going to flip over the top card of the jar deck, and whatever color jar it is, then they get the top token from that stack. And so they will collect points from these tokens, and then they will also roll a dice, and they will take dice out of one section every turn. So they'll be taking dice out that you won't have to choose from as you go through the different rounds. One of the interesting things about the solo is that, like I said, you're going to play all 12 of the pawns, but you play 6 in the first round, and those don't come off. They stay there. So then when you get into the second round, you are limited to the locations that you didn't use in the first round. So it definitely does lead to, or can lead to, some analysis paralysis in trying to figure out exactly the right place to use these pawns and which dice pip value to take. Noctiluca honestly is a fantastic game. It's great solo and multiplayer. I loved my plays of Noctiluca. It's one that I would highly recommend. It's not a super well-known game, but Shem Phillips is obviously a very popular designer. He's more well-known for his West Kingdom, those games. So Architects, Paladins, Raiders of the North Sea, and his newest South Tigris series as well. So if you are a fan of Shem Phillips and you like abstract strategy games, this is definitely one to check out. It comes in at number 8 on my list, mainly just because there were a lot of great games on my list this time, and I enjoy all of them. And this is just kind of where it fell. So that's Noctiluca at number 8. Number 7 is Messina 1347. Messina 1347 was published in 2021 by Delicious Games and Rio Grande Games here in the States. It's designed by Vladimir Suchi and Raul Fernandez Aparicio, and the artwork is from Michael Pichi. Messina 1347 is basically a beat your own score mode for the solo game. And the beat your own score mode has a set target score, just like in Underwater Cities and in Praga Caput Regni. And just like those games, the target score is pretty high and very difficult to beat. In fact, in all of my plays of Messina 1347, I never met the target score of 130, which is considered a good game, or 140, which is considered a great game. I came pretty close on one of my plays at 123, so just a little bit shy of the 130 target, but still coming up a bit short. Now, Messina 1347 is a worker placement and resource management game primarily. And in the game, you will be setting up a set of tiles in the center, and you use essentially the same exact tiles for every single game, but the arrangement and layout of those tiles, how they are placed next to each other, is different on each of the plays. So you'll set these tiles out, and then each round, essentially what you will have is there will be plague cubes coming out into the board, and there will be three different types of like civilians that are out in the board. There's like nuns and builders and I think like aristocrats or noblemen, something like that. And so you will seed the board every round with these different types of citizens. You will seed the board with plague cubes in different areas. And on your turn, what you're going to do is you will have 3 meeples for sure when you start out the game, and you can gain extra meeples throughout the game as you play and you move up on some of the tracks. But you will, in the first round, take one of your meeples and just place it out into one of these tiles, one of these locations. And your first thing that you want to do is potentially fight the plague. So if you have fire tokens, then you can fight the plague and remove these plague cubes. That will move you up on the popularity track, which is definitely important. It will earn you points, but it will also earn you bonuses as you go throughout the game that will help you out. And then once you have destroyed any plague cubes that are there, you will rescue any citizens that are on that tile. If there was plague cubes there to begin with, then they go into your quarantine cabins. Otherwise, they just come into your main area of your player board. And then after you have rescued the citizens, you have 2 options. You can either take the action on the tile that you went to, or when you get later into the game, you will be able to repopulate the tile. This is usually something that you're going to do further on in the game because you do have to acquire a wagon tile or multiple wagon tiles in order to repopulate Messina. But there are so many different little mechanics going on in this game and how you chain your actions together to get the most out of every single turn, because you only have a set number of turns in the game in order to achieve this 130 points, that you really have to think through everything and plan it out carefully. What I found in my plays is that repopulating Messina is crucial, like crucial to the game and scoring well at the end. Particularly in the solo game, if you do not repopulate at least probably 4 of those tiles by the end of the game, you're just not going to be able to get up there with the points. The first couple of games that I played, I was scoring in like the 50s total for the entire game. So with a target goal of 130 being a good score, I was really far off of it. And that was the main thing that I found that I wasn't doing. I was focusing a lot on my own individual player board and my estate. And that just really didn't feel like it was being successful. And when I switched over to really primarily focusing on how do I get myself into a position where I can repopulate Messina, that's when I saw my scores really going up. And so for me, with Messina 1347, that's why it comes in at number 7, is just that it felt at times very one note. Now, that could be fine for a lot of people because it is actually quite thematic with the theme of the game. So you are in Messina, it is the time of the Black Plague, so the Black Plague is coming in on ships at the docks, and you are evacuating the citizens out of Messina so that they're not dying of the plague. And then once the plague starts to subside and you have less plague cubes coming in at the end of the game, then you're going to be sending those citizens back out into Messina and repopulating the city. And so thematically, it does make a lot of sense why you would want to take the actions that you want to take and why you want to focus on the strategy that you want to focus on. But for people who like a game that's a little bit more open, where you can kind of explore all of the different mechanisms and areas of the game without having to feel like you're having to focus on one specific task, this might not be the one for you. It definitely felt more closed than his other games like Underwater Cities and Praga Caput Regni, were more open, even though the tightness of the actions and the combination of the actions felt very similar. The strategy and objectives felt more open on those two games. And so that's why this one is coming in at number 7. But I do absolutely love this one. I would like to try this one multiplayer and see how that feels compared to the solo game. But it's one that I'm definitely going to pull out more for solo and see if I can hit that target goal of 130. So that is number 7, Messina 1347. Number 6 is the only game on my list that does not have an official solo mode included out of the box. This is Carpe Diem. Carpe Diem is a 2018 game designed by Stefan Feld with artwork from Lalonda Harushka, and the copy that I have was published by Alia Games and Ravensburger. So Carpe Diem is a tile placement game, and there's a little bit of tile drafting where you are going to be selecting the tiles that are placed onto your player board. So everyone will have an individual player board. And this is another one that I have played multiplayer as well as solo. So you'll have your individual player board, and on your turn, in the center of the main board, there will be different kind of districts where there are 4 tiles set out. And you will move your player marker to a new location from the one that you were originally at, and you will take one of the tiles that's there. You will take that tile, you will add it to your player board. The very first tile is going to go in the center of your board. And then after that, you have to play adjacent to a tile that you've already placed. So it's very standard for tile placement games if you have played any of those. What you're trying to do is combine buildings and fields of the same type. And when you do this, you will gain a benefit from the building or the field. If you complete fields, then you'll gain resources like fish or grapes or like tea leaves, and you'll collect those. If you finish the buildings, then you will gain different resources like moving up on the bandolero track, which is going to be worth points at the end of the game. Or if you complete these green buildings, then you can actually gain additional tiles from the bottom row of the main board and potentially have more tiles at the end than you would have originally. You can also just gain straight coins from building different buildings, and you can gain fountain cards, which give you scoring objectives for the end of the game. So you'll be building out your buildings and your fields on your own personal player board, and then once you have placed 7 tiles, or you've collected 7 tiles and had 7 turns during the round, then you will go into a scoring phase. It will be 4 rounds for the game, and each of those rounds you'll be placing 7 tiles for free and maybe some additional ones if you're building those green buildings. The way that the solo mode that I found on BGG works is you will have a 4-sided dice, and on your turn you'll play just normally. You'll take your turn as usual, and then the AI player is just going to be taking tiles away from you and taking scoring objective options away from you. So they'll roll their dice. If it's an odd number, they will move to the left. If it's an even number, they'll move to the right. Then you'll roll the dice again, and depending on what you roll, it will take a specific tile in one of the 4 locations. If there are 3 tiles left, it will actually take all 3 of them and clear them out, and then you'll take your turn. When you get to the scoring round the scoring phase at the end of the round, the way that the scoring works is you will at the beginning have set up all of these cards that have joining sections. So where 2 cards join on the board, you could score those 2 cards because you're going to place your scoring marker where they meet. And you will score 4 times. You'll have 4 scoring markers. And so you will always score first, and you will pick 2 of the objective cards that are available that you want to score. You'll put your marker there, and you will score based on the objective card. So it might say if you have 3 chimneys, then you get 4 points. If you have a fish and a grapes and a leaf to turn in, then you'll get 4 points. And these are pretty much all you can do them more than once. So if I had 2 fish and 2 grapes and 2 leaves, I could turn all 6 of them in and get 8 points instead of just 4. So you will pick one, you'll score it, and then the AI player, you'll roll the dice twice, you'll sum that together, and then you'll count the different scoring locations, and then you'll place their marker wherever it lands based on the number you rolled. And they'll just block that off. So those markers stay until the end of the game. And then on the next scoring round, those 2 scoring locations can't be used again, so you have to use one of the other ones. The solo mode is extremely smooth for Carpe Diem, and because for the most part, Carpe Diem is a kind of a solitaire game that you're building out your own player board and you're going to score at the end for your own player board, there's not a lot of like player interaction that you're missing, and the dice works really effectively to move the AI player around, take tiles out just like a regular player would, and then to block off some of those scoring objective player areas just like a regular player would. So I found that it played extremely well as a solo. It's super quick. It's by far my favorite Stefan Feld game that I have played, and I'm really happy to have it in my collection. It's one that's going to stay. It's one that I'm going to pull out for solo. It sets up quick, it plays quick, and there's just something so satisfying about planning out the way that your estate is going to be laid out with how you're grabbing all of these tiles. You'll also be scoring for how you lay out your board. So each game is going to be a little bit different because you'll set up this frame around your board each time that will tell you if you have, like, for example, a lake that crosses this particular line on your board, then you get 5 points. If you have a green building that crosses this line on your board, then you'll get 4 points. So you're always trying to play towards those different arrangements based on how your frame got set up for that particular game. And it's so much fun. It's a nice little solo puzzle. If you have Carpe Diem at home or you have played it, you like it, it's one that I highly recommend to check out. Grab the solo mode rules from on Board Game Geek and give it a try. It's so simple that once you've read the rules, you can pretty much play without the rules being next to you, because you're just rolling the dice and taking out some tiles and blocking off some scoring opportunities. So that is my number 6, Carpe Diem. Okay, we're in the top 5. The top 5 is going to start out with Gugong. Gugong is a 2018 game that was designed by Andreas Stedding, and artwork is from Andreas Riesch. The publisher was Game Brewer, and Tasty Minstrel Games also published this one. They are no longer around, so it's primarily just Game Brewer now. Gugong is a game that I picked up, and I've talked about this in my recent top 100, so I won't go too deep into it, but it's a game that I picked up not knowing a whole lot about it other than that it looked nice and it included a solo. So the solo mode for Gugong is a card-driven AI, and it plays very similar. This is one I have only played solo, so I can't speak to the multiplayer, but the AI player does play as a player. So it is going to take actions. It is going to go out and move around the board like you do. It is going to fight for first player position. It is going to collect the jade tokens and try to collect a full set of those and take the cheap ones. It's going to contribute on the Great Wall area. So it is going to go out and play as a player. There are multiple difficulty modes that you can play with in Gugong for the AI. So you can set it up differently, and basically you just give them more to start with, so that maybe they get an extra turn every round before you do, or they're going to score extra points for things to make it more difficult. So in Gugong, you are going to be taking basically worker placement actions, but the way that the worker placement works in Gugong is a little bit different than games where you just set your meeple out, you take the action, and you're done. In Gugong, you have a hand of favor cards or gift cards that you will start the round out with. And on your turn, you will take one of your gift cards from your hand and you will exchange it with a gift card that's at one of the locations on the board. And if your gift is of a higher value or worth than the gift that you exchange it for, then you get to take the action on the gift card that you played and the action of the location that you played it to. If the value of the gift that you're exchanging is lower than the card that you are exchanging it for that's on the board, then you either have to spend one of your worker resources, which are just like little wooden cubes. You can spend, I think, one or two of those, I think it might be two, to then take the actions. Or you can actually spend one of your gift cards, discard it, so you essentially lose a turn to actually take the actions. Or you can do none of those and just exchange the cards and don't take any actions. You don't take the card action or the location action. So you're really trying to plan out each of your turns so that you don't have to spend a card or your resources in order to just simply take the actions of the card and the location that you went to. But you're also just trying to plan out which locations actually will help you and you can actually use as you're going through, because there are locations, for example, like the Jade location, if you don't have the set number of worker tokens in your resources, then there's no point in going there, even if you could go there and exchange gifts, because you can't take that action because you don't have enough to spend. Your workers are extremely limited throughout the game, and I think it maxes out at 10 or 12 per person that you can get total. And how you're going to get more workers is by actually collecting gift cards throughout the game that match the dice that were rolled at the beginning of the round. So you're going to roll 3 dice, and if the cards that you're taking during the round match those dice, then you'll get extra workers going into the next round. And you'll also potentially gain extra points if you matched more than the AI or matched more than other players in a multiplayer game. So there's so many different things that you're thinking about in this game. I just found it super engaging, a lot of fun. And again, I've talked about this. This is one that is in my top 100. So if you want to hear about this game more, you can definitely check out that video as well. But for the AI, the reason that this one is coming in at number 5 and not higher, even though I really do love the game, is that because there are so many different locations, the AI player plays just slightly differently than you do. And I found that I still had to, even after 5 plays, reference the rule book for almost all of their turns just to remind myself, am I playing this right? Am I playing this right? I had a hard time for some reason remembering that the AI player was going to get to take the card action and the location action, which I don't know why that was hard because that's what the player does also. But I found that I had to reference the rule book, and so it wasn't quite as intuitive as some other games that I've played. But it was super engaging. The AI difficulty levels seemed to be pretty good, and it was challenging to beat even on the easy mode. So it's one that I will continue to pull out. I really had a great time with it. And if you have not tried Gugong, it's one that I would recommend that you check out. So that is my number 5, Gugong. Number 4 is the biggest game that was on my 10x5 solo challenge for the first set, and it is the Everdell Complete Collection. Everdell is a fantastic game. I'm sure if you're watching this, most of you are familiar with Everdell, but it is a worker placement and hand management tableau building game. So on your turn, you essentially have 2 options. You can either place a worker out somewhere on the board or on cards that you've previously played in your own tableau, or you can play a card. And that's basically your 2 options. Your goal in Everdell is to build out a tableau of critters and construction cards in front of you. You are limited to 15 cards max in your tableau, and you'll earn points from the cards that you've played. You'll earn points by claiming special event cards or just regular events throughout the game. Each round that you're playing, you'll play over 4 seasons, you will actually gain benefits. So a lot of the rounds you'll be gaining workers, or you'll be activating cards in your tableau a second time. You'll be gaining extra cards from the meadow and things like that. When you're playing Everdell, particularly the first time you start out in that first round and you have your 2 little workers and no resources to start with, and you just look at it and say, there's no way that I'm going to be able to fill out this entire tableau with 15 cards. And typically by the end, you are trying to find ways that maybe you can get rid of cards out of your tableau so that you can build other ones in because you run out of space. In Everdell, like I said, I played the complete collection, which I picked up from the most recent Kickstarter. It includes the base game Everdell, and it also includes all of the expansions that have been published to this point. The original base game had a solo mode that was the Rugwort solo mode, and I have played that game. I did not play the Rugwort solo mode for my 10x5 solo challenge, though. I actually played the new Nightweave solo mode, which was included in the Mistwood expansion. But the Rugwort solo mode, like I said, I have played it, and it's the mode that you can play on the app. If you have the digital version app of the game, then you can play the Rugwort solo mode there. And I've played it quite a bit on the app for the Rugwort mode. But in the Rugwort mode, essentially what you will have is you're going to be blocking off different locations in the meadow for these different cards each season. And so when you get to the end, you have basically 4 cards that are blocked off in the meadow that you can't get at all. They're just like stagnant, and you then have 4 cards in the meadow that you can choose from. And Rugwort behaves in a very predictable way. So he's going to go to different locations in a predictable pattern. And there's not a lot that you can do about it. There's no randomness, there's no variation. The solo mode is okay. It's fine. It's not the one that I prefer to play, though. The Mistwood expansion introduced the Nightweave solo mode, which is an AI card-driven mode, which is my personal preferred solo method for most games. So the way that the Nightweave player works is it will have a deck of solo cards, and there's multiple difficulty levels in the game. And I played primarily on the super easy level, because one of the things that I was doing with this solo challenge is exploring all of the different expansions. So I just sort of played on the easy level to try everything out and didn't get too deep into trying to get stomped by this AI. But you'll have some boards that you'll play with. They'll give you some iconography and tips about how it plays and helping with setup and helping to remember the rules. And you'll have this deck of cards that you'll set up. Some of the cards only have actions that they'll take in the winter, so those will come into play later. So the deck that you're using through the AI player will grow throughout the seasons, and the cards will have 4 different areas for the different seasons. So it will tell you if Nightweave is in the spring, she'll do this. If she is in the autumn, then she'll do this. So she'll take different actions based on the season, just as a human player would adjust their game to the season as you go throughout. You're not going to be claiming a whole bunch of those events in the first, season or 2, and you're not going to be going and taking those journey actions until that final season when you're getting ready to finish up. You're discarding cards to turn them in for points. So you'll flip over a card for Nightweave. It will tell you what action to take for her. And most of the time it will be to either place one of her spider workers out into the meadow somewhere or into the forest somewhere to take up a worker placement location, or it will be to actually take this giant Nightweave meeple itself and place it out into the meadow. And when you place the Nightweave out into the meadow, you will roll an 8-sided die, and then you will place Nightweave in that location. And typically you will take the card that was there and build it into her city for her tableau. And then that spot will be blocked off until Nightweave has to prepare for season, and she'll pull everybody back just like you would if you were preparing for season. There are additional modes that are included that you can play with where she actually will block off the cards around her, or there'll be some sort of negative impact if there's a card around where she's at in the meadow and you take that card. But the nice thing that I liked that put it above the Rugwort solo mode for me is that there's variation. You don't know what cards Nightweave is going to take from the meadow. And because she is taking that card from the meadow, she's going to help you kind of cycle through the meadow a little bit more, because she'll be taking cards out and playing them into her tableau, or she'll be taking cards out and discarding them. So you'll have more turnover in those meadow cards, and nothing gets necessarily stuck forever. So just because you see a card is in the upper left-hand corner, it doesn't mean that, Rugwort would just block it if you didn't take it, and then it's stuck there forever and you're not going to see anything cycle through. So I really liked it for that point, but then it also gives you a more robust solo scoring, and you have a player who is creating their own tableau, who's going to be scoring points for their own tableau, who's competing for those different events, both the special events and the basic events with you, and is going to be claiming those. So I really enjoyed the Mistwood version of the solo in particular. And it honestly has a bunch of content in that expansion that I haven't even touched yet, which I'm looking forward to getting into. Like, she has different personalities that you can play with. She has different player abilities that you can add in. There's just so much content in that Mistwood. And I'm looking forward to exploring Mistwood and the Nightweave character more with the personalities and the different difficulty levels. The reason that Everdell, despite the fact that I love the game, the artwork is fantastic, just absolutely gorgeous. The reason that it falls a little bit down on the list and only comes in at number 4 is honestly the sheer size of the box. And you can probably see it in my shelf down here. So it's taking up this enormous space down here on my shelf. It is super big. It is super heavy. It takes a lot to get everything out and onto the table. Everdell is actually the one that I left to the end of my solo challenge so that I could literally just pull it out, set it up, leave it, and then come play over several days and just leave it set up on the table, because it was just such an event to get that out of the box and get it to the table. I forgot to mention that this was originally a 2018 game, but the complete collection came out last year, which was 2022, along with those new expansions. It was designed by James A. Wilson with artwork from Andrew Bosley, and it was published by Starling Games. So that is, like I said, my number 4, Everdell. Number 3 is Santa Maria. Santa Maria is a 2017 game published by Aporta Games. It was designed by Eilif Svensson and Christian Amundsen Ostby, and the artwork is from Jarmund Bonnet. Santa Maria is the second big box game that I have played from Aporta Games after absolutely falling in love with The Magnificent. The Magnificent is my number 2 favorite game of all time, so Santa Maria was high up on my list of things that I wanted to try and see if I would enjoy it. This is another one that was on my top 100 list, so if you're curious, you can also find out more about Santa Maria on that list. But I have played Santa Maria multiplayer as well as solo, and the rules are pretty straightforward and very simple, easy to learn from the rulebook. The solo game is basically a beat your own score mode, very similar to The Magnificent. They give you a target score and say this is a good score, and then you just play solo. So in Santa Maria, you are going to be building out a board in front of you with polyomino tiles, and all of the tiles are basically either 2 or 3 tiles large, and so you have this kind of small board. I think it's like 7 by 7 total size. And what you're going to be doing is you can either on your turn buy a tile and add it to your board, or you can take a dice, either one of your own personal dice, or you can draft a community dice from the main board. And then you will take that dice and you will basically, depending on the number of the pip value from 1 to 6, you will either run it down a column or across a row. So I think the white dice from the community are the ones that you run down, and then the blue dice, which are your own, you'll run across. When we say run down or across, essentially every tile or every square that you come to as you travel will have potentially a tile that you've placed there with an action. So if there's an action when you move the dice across, then you'll take that action, and then you keep going, you'll take that action, you'll keep going, you'll take the next action. The last action that you take, the dice will stay on that tile for the rest of the round, and then you can't take that action again. So if I ran my white or my blue 1 die across all the way to the corner, and then I come back later on and I run the 6 dice down, you wouldn't be able to take the action where the blue dice is at because it's blocked. And then the other thing you can do is actually spend coins to take actions. And this will also block actions on your board, similar to how the dice do. The first one, you can spend 1 coin. You just set it on the tile that you're going to take the action from. You can't activate that again during that round. The second time you want to do it, it's 2 coins, and then 3, and then 4. And you can keep doing this as long as you can afford it. So you will play out taking one of these actions as many times as you want or are able to during that round. And then once you're done, you can't or don't want to take any more actions, then you will go into basically a scoring round, and you will be able to take one final action to move up on one of the 2, like the prayer track or the conquistador track, or you can do an additional shipment of resources, or you can take a small 1 tile that you can fit in and fill in on your board. As you move up on these tracks, either by taking actions or from the final end of round actions, you will be gaining extra dice workers that you'll be using. You'll be gaining monk tokens that you can use to either get an immediate benefit of resources or points, or you can place out to get ongoing benefits, or you can place out to get endgame scoring objectives for points. And you'll play over 3 rounds total. And then once you get done, you will score up for any of the endgame scoring objectives that you've claimed. You will score for all of the shipments that you've made. You'll score for any in-game points that you've made. You will score for completed rows and columns on your board where you have these little pilgrims or these people on your roads. And there's all different scoring objectives, so they change every game, and there's a lot of variability in the game. Santa Maria is a super, super fun game. It is one of my all-time favorites. Like I said, it shows up in my top 100. It's pretty high up on the list, towards the top. And although it doesn't quite beat out the Magnificent for my favorite of the games from Aporta Games, it is absolutely one that will be staying in my collection. It's not easy to find in the States, so my used copy that I picked up is not going anywhere. It's one that I really enjoy playing multiplayer, love playing solo, and I will definitely be pulling this one out again and again. Like I said, the solo is just a simple beat your own score. There's a target score that you are trying to beat. I don't think I actually made it to the target score in any of my plays, but if I didn't, I came pretty close on a couple of plays. It's very competitive, like the Magnificent, tough to get to that target score, but just so much fun. So that is my number 3, Santa Maria. Number 2 is Euphoria, Build a Better Dystopia. Euphoria is a 2013 game designed by Jamie Stegmaier and Alan Stone. It was published by Stonemaier Games with artwork from Jackie Davis. Euphoria Build a Better Dystopia is one of my all-time favorite games. It actually is number 5 on my top 100 list, so you can certainly check out my top 10 video and learn a bit more about Euphoria there also. But Euphoria is a dice worker placement game that is set in a dystopian future where you are part of the government or the elite or whoever is trying to perpetuate and continue this dystopian society and civilization that you're living in. And so you have these dice workers, and the pip values will represent their intelligence or how aware they are. And so as you are playing, you will have periodic knowledge checks where you have to roll your dice. And if your workers are too smart, then they catch on to the fact that they're living in this dystopia and they flee and they run away and they won't work for you. So you'll lose workers in this game if they get too smart. So in Euphoria, you are going to be using these dice workers and placing them out onto the main board in order to collect resources of different types so that you can build these marketplaces and put your influence stars out onto the board. It is a race, and the first player to get to 10 stars, so they have all their stars out on the board, immediately wins. There are no points. There is no math that you have to do at the end of the game. Just if you get your 10 stars out first, then you win. The solo mode for Euphoria was included in the expansion called Ignorance is Bliss. The expansion comes with a solo mode from the Automa Factory, which is common for Stonemaier games if you're familiar with them. It is a card-driven solo mode where you actually are playing against 2 different AI players. So it mimics a 3-player game instead of just a 2-player game. You can play with the cards, although I have actually, I think maybe only once played with the AI cards. There is a app online, if you are familiar with, there's a GitHub app that you can use for this one from, I think it's called myautoma.github. And you basically just put in Euphoria. They have several games on here, and Euphoria is one of them. So it will play the cards for you. It'll shuffle the cards. It will take care of telling you where you should place the workers for the different AI players, and it really makes the solo play extremely smooth. So I have always played with the GitHub app version of the solo cards instead, but with the expansion, you'll get the solo cards and you'll set up the decks. So on your turn, you'll play just like a multiplayer game. There's no changes to the rules. You will either place one of your workers out and take the action of the location that you place your worker, or you will recall your workers back, do a knowledge check, and then that's your turn. On the AI player's turn, you will flip over a card, and the AI player will then place one of their workers out onto the board, depending on the pip value of the dice and the action shown on the card. They will also potentially be pulling their workers back when they have run out and possibly leaving workers behind. So sometimes when they'll pull workers back, they'll leave their highest values behind, which basically makes it harder for you to advance on your influence tracks on the bottom if their workers are left behind in your locations, which is typically where they will leave them. So you will be playing until someone reaches 10 stars out on the board. This includes both of the AI players. If either of them do it first, then you lose. There are several levels of difficulty for this game, as well as in a lot of the other ones that I've talked about today also. But I typically play on either the beginner mode or like the next level, the intermediate mode. Both are very challenging. And one of the reasons why Euphoria ends up so high on my list is because even playing against an AI, it feels like the multiplayer game. It feels tense. It feels like a race. You always are down to like that last turn of, I just needed one more action and I was going to be able to get, 3 stars out on this last action, but the AI puts that last star out right before you and pulls out the win. So every time that you win in Euphoria, it just feels really good. Like you really worked hard on getting that win and eked it out. Now, because there are dice involved in the game, you can have bad games where you just roll high all game. unlike a lot of games in Euphoria, you generally want to be rolling low. You want to be rolling low numbers so that your workers are nice and compliant and will go out and do the work for you and increase your influence in your different allegiances and factions. There's just a ton of content in the box as far as the different recruits that you can have that give you different abilities throughout the game. So your strategies will be varied every time that you play. Even though the AI players are pretty consistent on how they play, you can test out different strategies in different modes and see what works and what doesn't work when you're playing against the AI players. It's Like I said, it's one of my favorite games, and I talk a lot about it in my top 100 as well, so I won't go on too long about it today, but Euphoria is a fantastic game. It's one that, like I said, will probably never leave my collection. I have so much fun with it, and it's always one that I like pulling out. It doesn't really take too long to play either, but it's just so satisfying when I get to play it. So that is my number 2, Euphoria. Okay, so that brings us to number 1. And if you remember what games I listed, you will know what comes in at number 1. It is Obsession. Obsession is a 2018 game published by Kayenta Games, and the artwork and design is from Dan Halligan. So Obsession is a game that I honestly didn't think I would like. This is another one that actually shows up in my top 100. I think it came in at number 11, just fell out of the top 10. But definitely one that I enjoy for sure. The reason that I put Obsession at number 1 for solo play specifically is just the sheer amount of solo specific content that comes with this game and that comes with the base game. You don't have to buy any additional expansions to get the solo play. You don't have to download anything or go find the solo mode somewhere extra. It plays similarly, well, almost exactly the same as the multiplayer game. So it's a very smooth solo mode, and you just have so much in the base game. When you add in the expansions, which again is not required to play it solo, but if you wanted to add the expansion anyway because you like the game, you add in the upstairs downstairs expansion, and now you have even more solo content to play with. So for people that are not familiar, Obsession is a tableau building tile game, and it's very different than a lot of games that I've played before. In fact, I don't think I've ever played a game that has mechanisms quite like this. So essentially you have a set of tiles that are in front of you that represent events that you can put on at your country estate in Victorian England. And then you will have a hand of cards that you're managing. So it's a little bit of a deck building game to go with the tableau building that represent guests or family members. So you have family members and guests that are considered the gentry. So you have these gentry cards. And on your turn, you are going to select one of the tiles that you have in front of you to host an event. So it might be that you're going to just actually host a family meeting. So you'll take this tile from your tableau, you'll set it onto your player board, and then each of these events will tell you that it requires a certain number of gentry cards. It could just be 2 family members. So then you have to play family members from your hand. It could be 2 ladies. It could be 5 gentlemen. It could be 1 gentleman and 1 lady. But it will tell you what cards you need to play from your hand to go with it. And then it will also tell you, typically on the tile and on the cards, what type of staff members you have to have in order to staff that event and host it for you. So you are managing staff as a resource. You are managing your family members and your gentry cards in your hand as a resource. And then you're using these tiles to take specific actions. So it's almost like an action selection, but you're physically taking this tile and saying, I am hosting this event. And then you're playing out your cards, and then you're staffing it with your different colored staff meeples from your service. And then you're going to earn favors based on the event that you hosted. So you can earn reputation, you can earn money, you can entice new guests to come to your party. So you can add more prestige guests or just regular guests to your hand. They go into your hand so you can use them on the very next turn. They don't go into like a discard pile. So it's very dynamic and you can really stretch out your game. And then once you've collected all of your favors, then you can actually buy new events from the marketplace to add into your tableau. So you're constantly building up this tableau and adding new tiles into it. Every time that you host an event, you are going to flip the tile over, and typically that will turn it from either negative points or no points into a certain number of victory points at the end. So you do want to, a lot of times, host as many of these events as you can. In the solo mode play specifically, you will be playing against an AI player who's going to be very minimally involved. So essentially what you're going to do is at the end of each round, there's like a board that you track the different turns on. And then at the end of so many turns or rounds, then you're going to have a courtship event. So you are trying to elicit the attention of the Fairchild, and you can do that by hosting events that they actually are interested in. And so each game is going to have a different number of or a different type of events that the Fairchilds are interested in. In the solo, you're going to be playing with a blind courtship. So you don't know going into the round what the Fairchilds are going to be looking for, but you do know what the AI card is telling you they have when they're going to compete in these courtships. So for each of the 5 different areas on your tableau, the AI card will show you that they have 2 points or 0 points or 8 points, or like some of them get really high towards the end of the game. And so you can constantly be comparing, okay, what does the AI have and what do I have in order to beat them no matter what gets flipped. So you can bank on, I know I can beat them in these 3, and I just kind of hope it's one of those 3, or you can try to beat them in all 5 of them and keep ahead, which is going to be very difficult. So during the courtships, you're going to flip over the courtship card and you'll compare your score in that particular area to the AI card. If they win, then they're going to get a VP card that they'll score at the end of the game. If you win, then you get the VP card, just like in a regular multiplayer game. When I talked about how much content there is for the solo game, there are solo cards that you're going to use for each of your games. There are different difficulty levels on those. So it will start with like a base score, and then they'll score points based on the different VP cards that they've collected. And then if they get the favor of the Fairchilds in the last round, they'll get that too. So that's 8 points. And you'll add all of these up. There's different cards within each like beginner. And so it scales up, and then it scales up, and then there's intermediate ones, and then there's advanced ones, and then there's like, I think, expert ones. And the base game comes with a good number of these cards just to begin with that you can play, and then have all of these different modes that you can play through. You also then have 5 different families in the base game that you will play as that give you different benefits to start out with. So you can mix and match the families that you're playing with and which kind of strategy you're going to go towards to beat these different AI players. Then if you do get the expansion with the upstairs downstairs, you get another family that you can play as, and you'll also get more solo content. So you get more solo cards that you can play with and more different families that you're going to compete against with the AI player. But then you also get some that are specific to upstairs, downstairs, and having those new workers in your service people. But on top of that, you get additional modes that you can play. So there's a mode included in the expansion where you can basically play as a team if you were playing multiplayer. But you can do this like tableau building mode, which I haven't played yet, but this just tells you like how much content is in the box. As I played this 5 times for the solo challenge, and I haven't even touched everything in the box. So you basically have a different round track. And as you go around this round track, your objective is less to do with courting the Fairchilds and more to do with really building out your estate so that you have like a very balanced estate. So you're trying to get like a set number of these different types of estate tiles before you get a certain amount around this board. And once you've met the objective to have the estate built out, then you like either add or subtract points depending on how long it took you to get there. So you've got that mode. You've got all of these extra solo cards, and you could just play this forever solo without really getting bored and without, seeing new combinations and new content and just it feeling different every time you play, and mixing in that tableau mode and mixing in, just the regular mode. And there's all kinds of different variations in the rule book that you can tweak and try out. There's just so much content in this that I had a blast and kept wanting to pull this out. It is just so much fun. It's beautiful. I typically would pull it out. I'd play it. I'd put on like Pandora in the background and have the themes or the soundtrack from like Pride and Prejudice playing in the background. It just feels very thematic. You've got all of the flavor text, which normally I'm not big on flavor text, but I really enjoyed it in Obsession. And this is one that I am just so grateful to have in our collection. I was gifted this copy around the Christmas time, and I just have so enjoyed it. It's one that I did not expect to like, and I have just fallen in love with it. So I finally understand the obsession that people have for Obsession in this hobby. And if you have not tried it, if you have not given it a chance, I would highly encourage you to give it a chance. I know that like Luke Hector over at the Broken Meeple has said that, the theme is not really his thing. He's not a Jane Austen fan. I'm definitely a Jane Austen fan. I love Jane Austen novels, Pride and Prejudice, all of that stuff. Even if you don't like Downton Abbey, like that's not your thing, you can still play it. It's got so much theme dripping in it that, like Luke said, you can really like ham it up and just go all in, do funny accents and just dig into it, have fun with it, make fun of it if you want to. But the gameplay is just fantastic. It's super tight. You aren't going to feel like you have enough time. You can play on the standard mode. You can play on the extended mode. There's solo options for both of those to play standard, extended, the tableau building. Just so much content in the box, and the production quality is fantastic. Everything looks beautiful on the table, and that's why it's my number one. I just can't get enough of it. I can't wait to pull it out, check out that tableau mode too, and continue to play it multiplayer as well with my mom and other people. So that is my number one, Obsession. Thanks so much for joining me today for this 10x5 solo challenge ranking. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing to the channel, and also following us on our other social media, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I will be doing another video like this, hopefully around September. Hopefully it won't take me as long to get the video filmed after I finish my current solo challenge. But I am working on my second solo challenge of the year, and if you're interested in that one, you can check out what all is included on that one on my Instagram channel, as well as seeing some photos and information about the games that I have been playing, as I have already started playing those and finished one of them already, all 5 games. So lots more to come on my Instagram. You can kind of watch as I play, come along with me on that. But until next time, have fun playing games with your family, friends, and especially solo. Bye.